Hey everyone, I'm back, and today we're going to be talking about Gladiator 2. And this movie is directed by Ridley Scott, and it stars Paul Mescal and Denzel Washington, and it is a sequel to Gladiator from 2000. 24 years later, in real time. In the movie's timeline, it's just 16 years later, and I was very disappointed by this movie. It tried to do exactly what the first movie did, but it just kept missing all of the things that made the first movie work so well. But going into my positives, I thought the acting was pretty good in this movie. Paul Mescal, I thought he was pretty good in the movie, although there were a couple times where he was required to yell that he just felt a little held back. But for the most part, he was good. I liked the opening credits sequence, and it was just kind of like a previously on Gladiator, but the way it was presented, I don't know exactly the best way to describe it. In terms of what animation it was being used, it was like paintings or something, and was like recreating everything from that first movie, just a little clip show. I thought it was cool looking. And the movie is so well shot. There's some great looking shots in this movie, and the action sequences were entertaining for the most part. Sometimes they were a bit goofy for me to take seriously. Like, there's one action scene towards the middle that's like in a coliseum where it's just on a boat and they're trying to survive. And I was like, oh my god, this is so stupid. But hand-to-hand combat action, I like. And when Denzel Washington came on screen, the movie did get better for me, and it kind of got slightly better as it went along. I'll give the movie props for that. And Denzel Washington was great in this movie. Also, I forgot to mention him. Like, he always does a good job, and this movie is no exception. And on to my negatives. I found this movie to be very cheesy, and I know there were some cheesy moments in the first movie, but in this movie, it just felt so out of place and just over the top and goofy and ridiculous. Like, I just couldn't take it seriously. And there are certain things that happened in the first movie that I just feel aren't in this movie as much. Like the emotional core of that first movie. Like, I really cared about what was going on. And you feel what our main character is going through. And the performance is really great. And the character is interesting. And you want to see where things are going. But in this movie, things just kind of happen and you're just kind of told certain things. And it just loses a lot of the impact. And the first Gladiator match that we get in this movie, and I'm going to compare it to the first movie, like the way it was set up was so much better in the first movie. And there was a guy like peeing himself, and it showed it because he was like scared of like dying. But in this movie, it's like, okay, we're doing this, and I guess this is what's happening now. And I was like, ugh. You really missed the point of what made that first movie great. And this time around, they use CG animals in this movie in the arenas sometimes. Like sometimes we get CG monkeys, a CG rhino, CG sharks. And the rhino I thought looked pretty good. The monkeys, not so much. The sharks, not so much. And it was just too much. Especially that shark water Poseidon action scene, or whatever you want to call it. That one I feel could have been taken out of the movie. There was also an overuse of slow motion in this movie that was kind of annoying. I never really cared whenever a character died in this movie. I was like, okay, that happened. And then we move on to the next scene, and throughout the entire film I was just a little bored. I wasn't really connecting with anything, and it never once turned into complete schlock for me. But at the same time, it never once gave me a reason to care. Like, sure, they try, but by the end of the day, I'm just not really feeling much of anything compared to that first movie. And I also want to mention this. If the first movie didn't exist, I think I would say this is an okay movie. But the fact that the first movie exists really drags it down, especially with the amount of member berries sprinkled throughout the movie. And there's at least like, I don't know, 15 minutes worth of member berries in this movie, where it's just flashbacks to the first movie, or just like reminding you of certain lines from that first movie to remind you that, hey, that first movie's great. And if you like those lines, then surely you'll like what's being presented in this movie, right? And all I kept thinking was like, just stop, be your own thing. This is so frustrating. There were some bad-looking practical effects in this movie at times, and overall, it was just a worse version of the first movie. And just take everything that worked about that first movie and just ignore it or like miss the point of it, and you have this movie. And sure, there are some good things in this movie, but for the most part, it just really didn't feel like it understood what made that first movie work. And it's from the same director also, Ridley Scott. And I was kind of excited to see this movie somewhat because I still like Ridley Scott, even if he hasn't had like a consistent track record. Like he has good movies. Like the best movie he's made in the past 10 years either would be The Martian or The Last Duel. Like one of those two, I think are pretty good. But in terms of great movies that he's made, the last one that I've seen from him that I would say I love would be Matchstick Men. I think that movie's pretty great. But that was 2003. So it's been a long time since he's made something that I absolutely loved. And this movie had some things in it that worked, but overall it just didn't really click with me. And also, the music in this movie was not only worse than the first movie, it just felt like generic movie music taking place in 200 AD, but also they also used the music from the first movie, and at the end of this movie they say they use the exact same music, and that kind of made me upset because without it, it's like, okay, what you're being shown is fine, it's not bad, it's one of the better scenes in the movie, not just because the movie is over, but what's being presented story-wise is actually kind of working for me. And the last line in the movie I kind of like. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to spoil anything, but it wrapped up nicely in that last scene. It's just that the music that they used gives off an implication of an impact, and I did not feel any impact when that happened. And that's about all I have to say about Gladiator 2. Watch Gladiator 1 over this any day. I think that movie's great. I think it's one of Ridley Scott's best movies. This one, not really sure why it had to be made. Just watch something else from Ridley Scott because it'll probably be better. Unless it's Alien Covenant. So I would recommend that you skip this movie because it's not worth your time and it's just kind of dull and misses what made that first movie work for me, and I got nothing else to say about it. So with all that being said, I'm going to give Gladiator 2 a 4 out of 10. Thank you for watching my videos. As always, if you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and comment down below what you thought of Gladiator 2 and my social media links. They will all be in the description, so follow me there. And last but not least, subscribe to be a part of Foley Nation, and I'll see you when I get my next review up, and that is going to be for Y tu mamá está bien, if I pronounce that correctly. That's Spanish for and your mother too, which is probably what I'm going to say when I actually talk about it. But look forward to that. But until I get that up, thank you for watching and have a great day.